All right. So, something I think we've all been kind of excited to really dig into is how to feel comfortable ordering food in English. Like a local, no more like awkwardly pointing at menus.
Right.
We're going for fluency here.
I love that. I mean, it's such a fantastic goal because even knowing a few key phrases can just like completely change how comfortable you feel navigating a restaurant, especially a new place.
Oh, absolutely. And it's almost like that feeling when you finally like successfully ask for directions in another language.
Totally.
You just like you feel so much more confident.
Yeah.
So walk us through this a little bit. We've got some great source material for this deep dive. Where does it all begin?
So our source starts with what they call kind of like the essential gear. Yeah. And these are like your basic vocabulary words, the menu, order, bill, things that might seem obvious.
Yeah.
But like having them solid in your vocabulary is kind of like laying the foundation of a house.
Yeah.
Like before you build the walls.
Right. It's like having those tools ready to go.
Yeah. So you're not like fumbling around for the right word when you're starving and the waiter's standing there like expectantly.
Exactly. Yeah. And then so the source takes it a step further. It gives you some of those really practical phrases.
Okay.
Like, for example, can I have a menu, please? Like simple, polite, gets the conversation started.
It's like that universal icebreaker, I feel like, for any restaurant situation. But then they get into some really interesting like nuances. Like they talk about the difference between saying, can I have, and I would like.
Right.
I mean, they both seem polite to me. So like, what's the difference?
Right. So that's a really key point you bring up. It's that level of formality and how that impacts your interaction. So can I have is like perfectly acceptable. Yeah. It's polite, of course, but I would like often signals that, that you're coming in on a slightly more formal level.
Okay.
And that can make a very subtle difference in how you're perceived. Interesting. It's like almost like choosing to wear a blazer to dinner. You're not being stuffy, but you're just signaling a slightly more elevated tone.
Exactly. Exactly.
I like that.
I like that analogy. And, while we're talking about like those subtle cues, our source is a really big proponent of remembering those little things that make a really big difference. Please and thank you.
Oh, I'm so with you there.
Yeah.
I think sometimes like we forget how far those two little words can go.
Totally.
Especially in like a new environment where you're not totally sure like how things work.
Absolutely. They're like those universal signs of respect and appreciation, It doesn't matter what language you're speaking.
Yeah.
They really show that you're acknowledging the effort that someone is making on your behalf.
It's like you said, good manners are a universal language.
Yes.
So, okay, so we've got the basics down. We're being polite. What's next?
So let's be honest. Even with the menu in front of us, sometimes those dishes, right? They sound like they're written in a completely different language.
Oh, tell me about it.
It can get really interesting.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there, staring blankly at the menu, hoping that the waiter doesn't notice our, like, deer in the headlights expression.
Exactly. And this is where our source comes to the rescue. They give us this brilliant phrase that's so simple, but it's so effective. What do you recommend?
Oh, are you kidding? Like, that's like the magic phrase, right? It's like, you instantly sound more confident. You sound like you're open to trying new things, and it takes the pressure off of you to like decipher this menu that might as well be written in ancient Greek.
Right. You get to like maybe discover some hidden gem you wouldn't have otherwise ordered.
Yeah.
And it shows the staff that you kind of trust their judgment.
Exactly.
But what's really fascinating is that in some cultures, recommending dishes is like second nature.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in other cultures, it's not as common.
That is super interesting. I'd never even thought about that.
Yeah.
So, like, depending on where you are in the world, asking for a recommendation could either be like a really smooth move, or it could lead to like a bit of a surprised look from your waiter.
Totally. And, this is where paying attention to, cultural context can be like really key. And our source doesn't necessarily like dive too deep into specific cultural differences or anything,
right?
But it really emphasizes this importance of being like observant and adaptable.
That's huge. That is such a valuable skill no matter where you are in the world.
Totally.
Okay, so we've got, what do you recommend? What other like linguistic life rafts does our source offer us for navigating these like choppy ordering waters?
So one thing that I loved is that, it really equips you to handle some common situations with like a lot more grace.
Okay.
So imagine this. You're curious about a dish. You want to know the price before committing, right?
Totally.
But instead of just being like, is this expensive?
Yeah, which feels awkward.
Right. Which, like, no one wants, like,
Right.
you can confidently say, excuse me, how much is the...
Ooh, that's good. I like that. Because it's subtle, but it shows that you're paying attention to value, which I feel like is important to a lot of people, like including myself.
Absolutely.
I hate that feeling of awkwardness when you realize a dish is like way out of your budget after you've already like shown interest in it.
Oh, totally. And that way you're being discreet.
Yeah.
You're being respectful, but you're staying in control of that dining experience.
Exactly.
And speaking of control, what if you need to make a change to your order?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it happens to all of us.
Totally.
Our source gives us, such a simple phrase, but it's so effective.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I meant to ask for.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that because it's like those small phrases that can just like totally boost your confidence because you don't feel like a
tourist just like struggling to communicate. You're someone who like knows how to handle themselves in different situations.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the words themselves, but it's about how you use them.
Okay.
Right. So our source talks about the importance of your tone and delivery.
Yeah.
They even mention like pauses and inflection.
It's so true. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly.
I mean, just like with any language, there's a big difference between like confidently ordering your meal and sounding like hesitant or unsure of yourself.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, I know I've been there
more
than once with that like deer in the headlights look.
Oh, yeah. It happens to the best of us.
Totally.
But I think this is where like this source really shines, is that it goes beyond simply, listing words and phrases.
Yeah.
It actually gives you conversation examples to practice with.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Because it's one thing to like memorize a word,
but to see how it all like fits together in a natural flowing conversation, it's like having a dress rehearsal for your like restaurant encounter.
Exactly. Like, for example, they'll like walk you through a typical coffee shop interaction and show the back and forth between like the customer and the barista.
Oh, cool.
They even talk about how a simple question like anything else can be this opportunity to either refine your order or like ask about recommendations.
It's like they're giving you the insider tips and tricks to like navigate all of these situations with ease. Okay, so we've got our basic phrases, we're being polite, we're even mastering like the art of conversation flow. What's next on our like culinary linguistic journey?
All right. So now that we've like really covered the essentials, our source takes us up a notch.
Okay.
And introduces us to what they call fancy restaurant words.
Ooh, fancy.
Right. So these are terms you might encounter in like more upscale dining environments. So think of it as like leveling up your vocabulary after that fine dining experience.
Okay. So like instead of saying veggies, you'd be like seasonal accoutrement.
You laugh, but you'd be surprised. Seasonal accoutrements might be pushing it a bit.
Okay.
But knowing the difference between like an appetizer and a starter.
Okay.
Or an entree and a main course, like those can make a really subtle difference.
Okay. I see what you mean. It's not about being like pretentious or anything. It's like understanding those subtle nuances of the language that's used in different settings.
Totally.
So give me some examples. What are some of these fancy restaurant words that I should be adding to my like culinary lexicon?
Okay, so a great example is the word entree. So in a lot of parts of the world, entree just means starter.
Right.
But in North America, it usually refers to the main course.
Oh, right. Right.
And so our source points out that this can be really confusing.
For sure.
For visitors. So knowing the difference can like help you avoid any like awkward misunderstandings,
That is super helpful. Gosh, I've definitely been in those situations where I've like had to do a double take when I'm like reading a menu in a different country and I'm like,
totally.
Wait, what? It's amazing how those like seemingly small differences in language can really trip you up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Anything else we should like look out for?
So another interesting one is the word appetizer. So it's like a more formal way of saying starter.
Okay.
And it actually it has roots in this French word appétisser, which means to stimulate the appetite.
So like by ordering an appetizer, you're not just choosing a dish.
Right.
You're engaging in like a little bit of culinary history.
Totally.
I love that. It makes that whole like dining experience feel so much more immersive.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got entree, we've got appetizer. What other like fancy restaurant words should we have up our sleeves?
Okay, so this might seem like a really basic one.
Right.
But our source brings up dessert.
Okay.
And while it's like a really common word, they point out that even like native English speakers sometimes mispronounce it.
Oh, you're so right. I've heard it mispronounced so many times.
Or dessert.
Dessert, not dessert, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so while, most people will understand what you mean, regardless, pronouncing it correctly, just adds like that extra touch of polish to your dining vocabulary.
Totally.
It's like, paying attention to those little details.
Oh, right.
Like, holding your cutlery correctly or knowing like which glass is for water and which one is for wine.
It's all about the finesse.
Exactly.
And speaking of finesse, this source has truly given us like a crash course in restaurant confidence.
I know. Yeah.
We went from like basic phrases to navigating menus to even like mastering those like really subtle vocabulary nuances.
It's amazing how much ground we covered.
I know, right?
But the key takeaway here isn't just to like memorize a bunch of words and phrases.
Yeah.
It's about like understanding how even those small shifts in language can make such a big difference.
Totally.
In how you feel and how you're perceived.
Absolutely. It's about like feeling empowered to navigate any like restaurant situation with confidence and,
yes,
with grace. Like no more deer in the headlights moments for us.
Exactly. And remember, even if you stumble over a word or two, like the most important thing is to just relax, enjoy the experience.
Oh, for sure.
And don't be afraid to like ask for clarification.
Totally.
I think most people are happy to help and they appreciate the effort that you're making.
So true. At the end of the day, it's about like connecting with people, experiencing new cultures, and of course, enjoying delicious food.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, go forth and confidently conquer those menus.
Bon appetit, everyone.